not.
4 nights this week.
Nope, Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Law Committee meeting for November 16th, 2022. I'm Vicki Plotsky, Chair of the Law Committee, and Majority Counsel, could you please take the roll?
Sure, Madam Chairwoman, Ms. Plasky.
Present.
Cunningham is excused. Mr. Bergdorf.
Here.
Feeney.
Here.
Coon.
Here.
Mayo.
Here.
Peter.
Here.
Ricard.
Present.
And Whalen. Whalen. Here. 8 present, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the previous minute?
There's a motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bergdorf.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ricard, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Did you want to say anything?
Oh, sure. Just a reminder that only committee members are allowed to ask questions of people who are here. Other legislators are as well. However, no one who is in the audience here, staff or anyone else, is allowed to ask questions of any person here. Just pursuant to our usual rules.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna go fairly quickly. A lot of things have been tabled. So item 2, local law A, has been tabled at request of sponsor. Item 3, also tabled at request of sponsor. Item 4, also tabled pending receipt of additional information. Item 5, local law J, tabled at request of sponsor. Items 6 and 7 have been tabled pending public hearing. We're going to jump to item 9, public hearing on local law P concerning teleworking. Mr. Epicoro, would you like to come to the table, please? Thank you. Welcome. How are you, legislator? Nice to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, so local law P for 2022. It's a local law for teleworking for Albany County employees. This applies only to Albany County as an employer. And this is basically to promote work-life balance for county employees, our workforce. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm open to ask.
Yes, Mr.
Answer. Yes.
Has this been discussed with the county executive's office, HR, or the people who would be managing the employees, work from home or other?
Nope.
Do we know how many employees this could affect?
Not necessarily. It is basically as written, this would only apply to positions that can be done remotely.
Like, how many is that?
I don't have a specific number. So each agency would have to see what positions can be done remotely and whether or not they would approve for those employees in those categories to work remotely.
Is there backup to this? Like, I'm just looking at this, I don't see like any type of, like besides the public hearing, like is there any backup to the legislation? Like what's the intent, how many employees, how it would be figured out, anything like that, or is it just a statement?
What do you mean? What the intent of the legislation?
No, I mean, the intent is to allow for people to work from home, but there's not.
The
how many-
purpose?
No, like, how would the program be developed?
So each agency would have to come up with their own.
But does it say that anywhere? Like, what's the?
Yes, it says that the. Where?
What exactly are you looking for? I'm sorry.
Like, so I know this is the public hearing for local law, but usually we get something in like the breakdown of what the law would do.
Well, usually that's addressed by the speaker, but certainly with regard to this, each agency would have the opportunity to determine, and obviously it's a case-specific thing, whether their employees can work remotely. This provides for that. Obviously, we can't know now exactly how many that would entail because each department would have to do it separately. Obviously, a laborer in DPW is not going to be able to work from home, whereas a legislative employee or DMV employee or someone who has a solely office job may be able to work from home theoretically.
Right.
At least possibly.
Okay, because I mean, just on this, the only thing I have on this is the legislation text that.
Oh, the local law is next.
underneath.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's why. Okay,
Yeah.
that's why I was asking. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I made that same
Okay.
thing.
Yes, Mr. Berg.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, did you want to?
Well, I was just going to ask, has there been any discussion about any IT resources needed for this?
No, not necessarily. Discussion of IT, you mean like computers?
Yes, is the county supposed to provide any computers for people to work from home, or are they gonna log in from their own resource, from their own?
So that is why we leave it to the agencies to see how they would develop their own remote work program.
Okay. Hold on, Mr. Bergdorf, I called on before, then I'll go to.
What is the, thank you, what is the policy now in the county with respect to teleworking?
I believe, I'm not sure what the county executive has ordered, but for the period of the pandemic, people who are able to work remotely are currently working remotely, I believe, but that is not permanent.
And then what about collective bargaining agreements? Is this issue addressed in those?
Yes.
What does it say?
It says that if you have a union that represents you, this would not affect your collective bargaining agreement that you have in place already. But if you are receiving more benefits from this than your collective bargaining agreement that you have in place, then this would surpass that. So whichever is more. And Rebecca can jump on this.
Yep, under section 6, supersession, it says this local law shall not supersede any existing telework policies and/or programs which have resulted from any collective bargaining agreement. So essentially, if you're a union employee and have a collective bargaining agreement in place, that would stand. I mean, whatever you have.
So contrary to what
You may have
just said.
misspoken, that's
Yeah.
possible.
So your policy would not trump a collective bargaining
Yeah,
agreement
it wouldn't
provision?
supersede it,
It
yeah,
would not.
right.
So what are the policies with respect to teleworking in the CBAs? Does anybody
I would
know?
imagine it varies by the 19 different agreements.
Some of them are pretty similar though, like does anybody have any idea what?
Offhand, I could not quote any of the 19 agreements, no.
No.
I would have to look it up.
Mr. Coon?
Yeah, are you asking what is in the agreements right
Yeah.
now? Oh,
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Paul, do you still have a question?
I
Yeah,
mean,
oh, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe a couple.
Do any provide for teleworking, do you know?
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Okay.
I think this needs to
You
be
might have
developed a
went-
little
Mr.
bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I am generally supportive of teleworking, okay? However, it troubles me when it says the purpose of this is to allow county employees to have more time for leisure activities and the ability to stay at home with families. Because, you know, we get 37 and a half hours worth of work out of somebody. And if I need to call social services, a person at social services who's a caseworker, and they're not working that day, is their phone gonna automatically be transferred to their home? And are they going to be at home, or are they gonna be at the movies with their family? And I mean, that's just an example, but I think this has got to be fleshed out to better serve the county's legitimate productivity needs. I am very concerned about the collective bargaining issue because to do this for some people while collective bargaining is going on for 19 different agreements creates new issues in the collective bargaining. And I think this really has to be fleshed out by HR and, you know, some group, I guess it would be us in the Personnel Committee, got to be a little more focused on how this would actually work instead of saying, just do it. That's my feeling at this time.
Understood.
So are you saying, because the collective bargaining is that if you have a collective bargaining agreement in place, then that stands. If you don't have any in place, then this works for you. So I'm not sure how the collective bargaining issue,
Well,
why collective bargaining is an issue with this.
Well, because for the most part, the balance of employees in Albany County are covered under collective bargaining agreements. It's a a large majority, I don't know what the exact number is, but of our, 2,500 employees, you know,
Maybe
many,
this is for us.
many
This is for
are
us.
covered under them. I mean, I would
Doesn't apply to everybody.
definitely willing to consider this, but this is sort of a skeleton, and to just throw the discretion out to HR and some person, not even the commissioner, you know, a teleworking coordinator in each department to decide what the policy is, I'm not sure that is a policy approach that you want to take.
Telecommuting has been done so much for so many years. There are so many programs that could be almost just plug and play. Here's your agreement, here's how you use the technology. I think the details would need to be worked out. I'm not sure that we need a local law to do this. It seems like something, and it's discretionary regardless, even with the local law.
Right.
But it's us. We don't need a local law to tell us to tell the county how to regulate its workforce. I'm a strong proponent of telecommuting and telework. I don't know that we need a local law. I'm not saying we don't, but I'm just making that comment that there are ways to make this work. So I'm not
And
sure
what
this is the
ways are
way.
you suggesting?
I think we would need to work ahead of time with HR. You know, they had, correct me if I'm wrong, did they have telecommuting during the pandemic?
Yes.
Yeah, so they know how to do this. They know how to, you know, observe their employees, make sure everyone's working the appropriate number of hours, being responsible. So they've been able to launch this successfully before during the pandemic. So I think it's a conversation with HR and I don't know, the commissioners, whoever else needs to be involved, like, do we want to implement this as a permanent program? I'm not convinced it has to be a local law, maybe a resolution, maybe something, but I support the idea, I'm just not sure this is how we do it. So I
Yeah,
think we
but
want
then the difference between a local law and a resolution would basically just mean that one is a resolution which you still have to vote for, and it's still going to be written the same exact way that this is written, except that one is a resolution and one is a local law.
Yeah, well, it's something that we can keep discussing. I've got Mr. Kuhn.
No, I'm on personnel, and
Yep.
our agenda, I'm sure, is gonna be a lot less busy than this one, so I'll talk about it tomorrow.
Okay,
I would just recommend maybe we table this until the county, the sponsor and the county executive's office with HR can figure out what our policy currently is, what we're requesting they do, and how that would possibly flush out. I don't, like the chairwoman said, telecommuting, teleworking can definitely work, but we don't govern our workforce. It's the county exec's office and the different departments, they need to be involved in crafting this policy. And right now, that doesn't seem to be the place.
Sounds good.
okay. Yeah, Mr. Bhavikar, would you, by any chance, consider tabling this pending a little more discussion, where you can talk to HR and executive and
Yeah,
get a little more information and try to come up with a plan?
I need to know if there are questions or there is a plan specifically that you're looking for, then I also want to know what those are so that those can be addressed. So what specifically are the questions that you have? Do you want the HR to say to us that they are approving for us to put up a policy that they should have telework in
That would
Albany
be- that
County?
would
What
be a-
exactly do you want?
Yeah, that would be a positive step, if human resources is on board, if executive is on board. Why did they discontinue it? You know, I think we need more information.
Who it would apply to?
No? Okay.
Who it
Still
wouldn't
going
apply
on.
to?
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I think it's,
Mr. Columbus Blackland.
I think it's also important to know about computer infrastructure. Because in today's world with cybersecurity, you have to have VPNs to do work at home, so that no one can get into the county computer system. So
Yes.
I have no idea whether our IT department at this time can do 500 virtual VPNs and has the equipment to do that. And I think you also need to build in some safeguards in here that say, in no circumstances should a teleworking position be approved unless the department can demonstrate that under that agreement, there will be at least the same productivity and availability of the employee as there is if they're working from a fixed location.
Yeah, that's actually in the
Well,
legislation as written.
Well, I didn't see it kind of said that way, but, I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I'm generally supportive.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying that the last thing that you just said is actually listed there. But yeah, I do agree that we should probably speak more with the HR and county executive. But some of the things that some of you are bringing up are already addressed in the legislation as written. Because it says productivity, when it comes to the productivity, it says that if your level of productivity is diminished by working from home, this is going to be evaluated. Your productivity is going to be evaluated consistently to see whether you are still meeting productions. And if your productions is diminished, then you can be asked to return back to working from the office permanently.
So, we do have limited time.
We're tabling
I think-
this,
Are
right?
you, would you mind tabling it for the
Yeah,
time
yeah,
being?
yeah, I would,
Okay,
yes.
so let's table it, request a sponsor, develop this a little more. In a way, the details of how many hours and how it's tracked can be in a telework agreement. It doesn't need to be in the local law, but that's
Right.
just my 2 cents. And I think HR probably has this down. We just need to, I think, flesh this out with them a little more.
Yep.
Mr. McLaughlin, did you have something? You kind of stood up rather significantly. Did you want to
Yeah,
add?
so I just thought it would be kind of essential for somebody from this side of things to at least acknowledge we were unaware of this until it came up on an agenda. We've had no conversation with anyone about it. We've been doing this for 3 years now. We have a very robust policy, and I know this because folks in our office utilize it on a regular basis. So, I mean, I'm all for codifying things, resolution, local law, whatever the case may be, but this exists. So, I mean, certainly if you have priorities in that regard, we want to hear what they are, but, maybe come to us and just pick our brains on things that we've been doing for a while, and we can, help you out.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan forward, so thank you. Thank you, Mr. Epicor,
Yo.
appreciate it. So item 9 is tabled at request of sponsor. Item 10 is tabled pending public hearing. And Mr. Legori, are you here on item 11?
Table.
It's tabled
It's
Well,
not a proposed sponsor because the other one was tabled.
for Westlaw?
No.
9, 10.
9 and 10 were requested sponsors.
Oh, yes,
They're not
I'm
pending
s-
public hearing.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. 10 is tabled at request of sponsor, and Mr. Legori is here on item 11. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
No, thank you. I'm here tonight with a request for legislative action for the renewal of the Westlaw Legal Research Services software package that's utilized by the attorneys and the legal staff throughout the county. The renewal of last year's agreement has gone up. We had an increase in user capacity under the agreement. It went up to 135 users with a cost increase that was anticipated of $13,131 per month, or essentially $157,574 per year. The agreement provides a license to conduct legal research for every county in county government. In addition, the paralegals and other non-county staff have authorized access to Westlaw, and non-legal department heads who have requested access to certain journals also have access. The agreement is broken into 4 components for control purposes and assignments of license. First is the district attorney's office. They assign its own licenses and they receive its own monthly billing. Same for the public defender, assigns its licenses, receives monthly billing. The assigned counsel program also is in the same boat. Finally, the law department assigns licenses for all assistant county attorneys and the alternate public defenders. The Director of Public Employee Relations, the Department of Immigration Attorneys, Sheriff's Counsel, Counsel of the County Exec, and Legislative Counsel. Those are all invoices that are paid by the law department, and chargebacks are made to the respective departments. The package that we have, it meets the needs of everybody for everything. Of note, there was a cost-saving measure. The county legal departments have moved away from paper, essentially libraries. One McKinney's subscription for a department can cost $30,000 on its own. So the cost savings is immeasurable. It not only saves money, but it's green. There are certain desktop books that we're still buying. The other issue is why Westlaw. It seems to be the subscription that we do, everybody chooses to use. We do buy softcover books from the other LexisNexis as well, so there's no giving one way or the other. But essentially, pursuant to the contract, calls for an increase in our monthly charge. Westlaw's providing us with 10 additional subscriptions, and they'll be divided equally among the public defender, the district attorney, and the county attorney's office. So that being said, I would take any questions concerning the contract.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Britton?
Just a quick one, and this is really just for my own knowledge. This is a professional service contract, correct?
Correct.
So do they make a proposal, we negotiate with the proposal and come to a price? Or does something like Westlaw, is it on a state bidders list? Is it, would another county with 150 users be charged the same? How does it get to that price?
It's a negotiated price with Westlaw. Basically 2 games in town, Westlaw and LexisNexis.
Okay.
So it goes back and forth. It's kind of the extent of my knowledge of how it's negotiated. It's not put out for a,
Oh, I just find, so many things are covered under a mini bid or a state procurement. I just wondered why something like this, which is standard probably for every municipal government and
Correct.
public authority in the state of New York.
yes, I'm sorry if I don't know more about the
Yeah.
process in which.
No,
it's reached,
that
but
was my
it's,
question.
It's sort of standard for anybody that has legal departments. You can't function without Westlaw or Lexis, one or the other. So in this case, it's Westlaw.
Mr. Mayo?
Just to split hairs, and I'm sorry, but you said here 135 users, and in Eugenia's memo it says 135, but in the justification, it has 125 users. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I didn't.
Dave, I think that was actually the number from last year. I think that's just a holdover accident.
Is that a holdover from last year?
I believe that was the number last year, if I
Okay, yeah,
recall.
because it went up by 10.
Yep.
That was last year's number.
Okay.
So, no, I'm sorry if that was confusing, I apologize.
Just
Any
for
additional
me.
questions?
It's okay.
Nobody else.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Keeney. Second. Thank you, Mr. Britton. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Thank you. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
You're out of the room. Thank you, Mr. Britton. All right, let's move to item 8. I just lost my. Do you want to read it for me, Caitlin?
Sure. Item 8 is authorizing agreements with Genoa Healthcare LLC regarding pharmacy services in the lease of space at 260 South Pearl Street in the city of Albany. Dr. Giordano, Mike McLaughlin from the exec's office, and I believe members of the law staff are here today as well.
Great. Thank you. Yes, this was, as you know, before the legislature the other evening and has been brought back for some questions and clarification and to see where we go forward from here. So I'd ask the legislators to bring up those questions now. What would you like to? Oh, sure, yeah. And I'm also being politely coached that you were already presented with questions previously that you'd like to address, and then we can get to any additional questions. How does that sound?
Just the ones I talked to you about yesterday, Mike.
I'm ready to answer them, I don't have them.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't remember which ones came from when, so if we could have a reciting of what's most recent, that'd be great, sorry.
I think
Sorry,
the two
Counsel.
questions yesterday were the opinion from law, which obviously they're here for, and the questions about adherence or compliance.
Compliance.
You want us, Dr. Giordano, would you like to start?
What is the question?
What's the question?
Oh, I believe the question, and Sam, please correct me if I'm wrong, was what was the compliance rate before Genoa came into, at DMH, before Genoa came into the picture?
Right, okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, thank you very much. This is an issue that I would like to try to cut through and make it intelligible to you all. It is, though, dense and nuanced, and I forgive me ahead of time for that. We started this process in 17 and 18 as part of a clinic redesign, and we tried to do a number of improvements. One of them was involved looking at creative ways to do our pharmacy work. It was inclusive of, we redesigned our waiting room and we did our back billing office redesign, and we were looking to change the quality of our services across the board. We learned at that time that the industry standard for chronic illness compliance rates were about 50%. And for chronic mental illness, we learned that the industry standard was between 50 and 70%. We had no reason to believe that our shop was any different, and we put pharmacy services on our list of perhaps innovative approaches, and that's what started this. Our data shows that our patients are going to pharmacies all throughout the county. None of those pharmacies have ever given us any compliance data, so we don't know what the compliance data was or the rates were. We assumed that there was nothing obviously different about our shop that would make us think that the standard industry numbers that we were seeing would be any different, and we thought this was a place to try to improve our work with our patients. And that's why we requested innovative approaches to delivering pharmacy services, in-house, out-of-house, whatever. Genoa was the responder, and we see now, since they're giving us reports directly, that our compliance rates on that small subset of patients is approaching 90%. I will also remind you that we serve almost 1,000 people in all of our services. Right now, there are 160 patients in the last year that have been, that our data shows has worked with Genoa, and that's the only subset that we know anything about compliance, because the rest of all of those patients are being served elsewhere in the county. CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, Target, Hannaford, Lincoln. We don't get any data from any of them, nor should they give it to us. We just know what this subset is now.
It's only those 160 people.
That we're convinced that we're approaching 90% with.
Okay, and that's who's using Genoa.
Those are the 160 in the last year.
Okay, thank you.
But we don't have a comparison because we're working with 20 or 30 other
Disparate
pharmacies.
pharmacies, okay. Are there follow-up questions?
Yeah, so, so only that subset of the patient population uses the in-house pharmacy?
Right now, in the last year, we have 160 patients out of the total N, which is well over 1,000, that have had prescriptions filled at Genoa.
Why is it only those 168?
Those are the ones that have elected to, either elected to use Genoa, or prescribers have chosen for medical reasons to use the pharmacy.
So you have 1,000 or so patients?
Right now, we have about 700 active patients in our clinic and another 100 in our other case management programs. But the 1,000 is over the course of the year when we run our data. Annually, we had 1,000 patients or more come through.
Okay.
And 160 of that group have, either are using Genoa now or have in the past year.
And are all 1,000 approximately of those patients, could they in theory use the in-house pharmacy services?
Absolutely.
And it just happens to be that about 16% are using
That's
Genoa.
correct. Well, it's not just happens to be, as I say, they've either elected to use it or the prescribers have, for medical necessity reasons, chosen Genoa. But it's
Okay.
clearly a small subset of the total.
And is that subset, that 16 or so percent, is that representative of the entire patient population? Or is that subset somehow, are the kinds of medicines that subset gets prescribed different than the general population?
Well,
Because there's been assertions that the particular medicines that we're talking about are particularly profitable
right,
for a
right,
pharmacy.
Right, okay. When I said dense and nuanced, I didn't know if you wanted to get into that part of this. But in fact, that's correct. So we have a chronically mentally ill population in all of our programs. Some of those patients receive injectable medication, long-acting injectables. For the most part, those are patients, again, I'll give you the numbers if you like, a small subset. These are folks who are seriously ill, who have had challenges taking medication as prescribed. Some a percentage of those folks are not particularly interested in treatment to begin with, and injections are ways of addressing their particular illness. It turns out that the money associated with that subset of medications, the injectables, is significantly higher than the rest. And, you know, there has been a movement of those injectables from other pharmacies to Genoa.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So a certain fraction of your, and I'm sorry, the certain fraction of your patient population requires this long-term injectables
Yes.
type of medicine.
Yes.
Are those patients that require that, are a greater percentage of them being directed or going to Genoa than are going sort of out to CVS or Rite Aid
Right.
or to Lincoln?
So historically, the majority of those long-acting injectable medications have been dealt with by Lincoln Pharmacy. The data shows that. That's not coincidence from our perspective, and it's not coincidence for our prescribers.
Is it because of their proximity to the
Yes.
facility?
Yes. And it's very clear that very few of the long-acting injectables are going to any of the other pharmacies in the area. When Genoa came on board, and it's only a small percentage of the total injectables that are going to Genoa now also, but it's significant, and I understand there's significant cost associated with that. But as the questions came from the legislature over the last year, I personally went to the prescribers. We tried to ask the patients, but the patients were kind of freaked out by us asking them about all of a sudden their medications. But the prescribers told us that in those instances, when a prescription that was at Lincoln, mostly for proximity and convenience for this particular type of medication, it was moved for the same reason. A lot of these folks show up unannounced. We have one shot at giving them the injection. For that subset of this group, having them on site in this pharmacy, our prescribers have decided made sense. Not for all of them, it's for some of them. And I have the numbers to show that long-acting injectables are still being dealt with by other pharmacies.
And I don't want to, I guess one last question. The people who are taking long-acting injectables,
Yes.
is it fair to say those are people with relatively serious mental health issues?
Well, the total end for us is serious and chronic mental illness. And those who are receiving long-acting injectables, by and large, are folks who have, by history, proven themselves to not be able to be as successful because of the seriousness of their illness. So they were not particularly compliant, or they didn't want to be in treatment to begin with. It's only through the treatment with these medications that some of these people are succeeding. So, you know, there's a lot of folks with mental illness in our community. Some of them have chronic illness. We're treating most of those. A subset of that group is on long-acting injectables, and a subset of that group is receiving their long-acting injectables at Genoa.
Do you think, this is my last question, I promise. Do you think, sorry, do you think, in your professional opinion, that you are seeing better patient outcomes with that patient population because of the fact that there is an on-site pharmacy at the facility?
My answer is unequivocally yes, but I'll qualify that by just reminding you all that you're kind enough to call me doctor, but I'm a psychologist, I'm not a medical doctor. We employ a team of psychiatrists, nurse practitioners who are responsible for the prescribing and the following. And, you know, it seems to me that there's general agreement that these patients are doing as well as they've ever done or better. It's not to say they can't do better, they can't do well elsewhere, but we have a 90% compliance rate with this group of people. That's a big deal for us. So,
Okay, I'm
Thanks.
gonna go to,
I'm done.
okay, I'm gonna go to Mr. Peter, then I want to make sure we've gotten all our questions through Dr. Giordano's. Mr. Peter.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. G. So, just to make sure I understand, like, what type of illnesses are the injectables being treated?
across the board, but mostly the major mental illness, schizophrenia type illnesses.
Are many of those that are going in to get this either homeless or in transient housing or things like that, or are they in a solid location? Or a continuous location?
I can't really answer that question, other than to say that those are challenges that all of our patients are facing. And the
Right.
more serious the mental illness, the more likely they are facing. Housing is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing for people.
And the reason I asked that is very simply that my area, which represents Lark Street, right around the Psych Center, right around Albany Med, when folks don't take their medication, when they have trouble getting it, when there's issues with housing and getting medications delivered, it's usually when they only get services that they can get on medication. And we've had conversation about Accord and stuff like that, and that's why Mr. Kuhn actually asked most of my questions, which was that, you know, my highest thing is, you know, and where people are making their money, whatever, that's the RFP process. But if more patients are getting a higher quality of care, and therefore a better outcome, that's all I care about. And what you've told me is that, and because when they don't, this subset tends to end up in my district, often without support services that they need and with a worse result.
I think any of these folks, wherever they're getting their prescriptions filled, are at risk for the challenges you're talking about. The advantages that we see for the patients that are using Genoa is a collaborative model, on-site, emergencies, medical necessity, a way to deal with arising situations that might not be able to be dealt with elsewhere. I think it's a fluid equation here. Some of these people are not doing well even with this kind of approach. But we felt this was part of our overall attempt to improve the quality of our services for some of the people that we're serving. And I understand that there's consequences to that.
And surprisingly, I'm actually done.
Thank you. Ms. Ryan. Yes, please.
So this contract is expired with Genoa, and now it's
It
up for.
will
Right.
in a few days.
Okay, so it's up for renewal, and if we don't renew this, I'm all for the on-site service, But if we choose not to extend it, not renew it, it's an extension. If we choose not to extend it, can you do a new RFP and search for other pharmacists to go in to that site?
I think that's a question for my colleague.
Because yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, the issue is that it should be, okay, sent out for an RFP or bid, but the issue that I guess you addressed during the recent meeting was the issue of the, as you termed it, the non-compete clause, which is a
Right.
restrictive covenant.
Right.
So,
Which I think is something not to be afraid of. I mean, we're certainly not litigation risk adverse here. I've seen plenty of things pass through that would subject us to liability, but aside from that, I think that this compete clause would be deemed unenforceable by a court because it's overly burdensome to us, and it would harm the public if you couldn't give them their treatment. So, you know, it imposes undue hardship, injures the public, and is unreasonably burdensome to us. So I think that in a court of law, it would be deemed to be void and unenforceable.
Are you asking his opinion, whether he agrees
Yeah.
with that? Okay,
Yeah,
so that's
do you
the
agree with
question.
that? Because you, I mean,
well, we
So-
had an opportunity to take a look at that. We
Uh-huh.
had, this obviously was negotiated between the parties, so it was a provision in the contract that was negotiated at that time. I wasn't with the office at that time, but the individual that was pertinent in the preparation or the review of the contract had informed us that she believes that that provision in the contract is enforceable. So you have to be mindful of the issue, and I certainly respect your opinion.
yeah.
But that is an issue that's contained in the contract, that is a paragraph. So, when John and I were speaking about this, it's a balance of the equities concerning, whether or not, if this contract is not renewed, or this agreement is not renewed, and if there is a decision to put a pharmacy or a similar pharmacy, you run afoul or potentially run afoul of that provision. So you have to be mindful of that and a determination made later with respect to whether or not that would be violated. So, but we do believe, based upon our review of it, that would be enforceable.
And what about the initial, so when this launched, this was the first vendor that came into this site when it launched under the RFP, the Genoa Pharmacy? There's never been
It's
anyone
my
else.
understanding it was the only.
This is the first time we've piloted this type of service.
But this site did not exist.
Yeah.
Right, so when the RFP went out, they were the only bidders, but did anyone reach out to the pharmacies in the area to put it on their radar and, say Lincoln Pharmacy that's been doing all the injectables, I spoke to the young lady that's the pharmacist there and she, they didn't bid on it, they didn't know about it, so why was it that the pharmacies that are local that did the injectables typically didn't get a heads up? Why, it seemed like it was, it was obviously publicly advertised or, procedurally correct, but
We
why
might wanna
wasn't?
state this as a question.
Yeah, my question is-
Whether there's any obligation on anyone's part to reach
Yeah.
out to those pharmacies.
Or is it
I
forbidden
believe
not
The
to?
RFPs are on a state.
Yeah.
I believe it was
So-
on the state
Website.
purchase.
Why wasn't it
So-
on their radar? Were you not supposed to tell them that this was
Because it
happening?
wasn't. I mean, the department came up with a scope of what they were looking for. That information then is conveyed to purchasing. Purchasing develops the RFP, certainly confers with the department to make sure that the contents of the RFP, the grading scale, et cetera, are what they need. And then purchasing handles that. So, to answer your question, no, it wasn't. And it wasn't sent to any other pharmacy in the area. It was put on the public system that is state regulated for public bidding. I realize that everyone says, well, it should have been, okay. Perhaps in hindsight, that makes sense, but the moral of the story is, once the scope is developed, it's out of the department's hands, and in fact, once it's released, they can't engage anymore. So any question about the RFP has to go through purchasing. So, if let's say somebody's interested in bidding, and so they have a question. That question has to go to purchasing. Purchasing then has to go to the department. The department, of course, writes up, what is it, an appendix, I believe they call it. Sorry, I'm not a legal mind. Then that goes back to purchasing, and purchasing goes to all of the interested parties, because everyone needs to get the answer so as to have that level of separation and protection. So that is the process that was used here.
And Ms. Whalen, can I just, Ms. Whalen, there is some lore going on here that if certain entities had known about this, they certainly would have submitted a bid. I'm not convinced that that's true, and we shouldn't accept that fact as true. That is a debatable assertion. So just,
Well,
I
I
think
guess
we
we'll see
all
the
need
next
to.
time, right? Either this year or in 2 years.
I-
Whether they'll apply, whether they'll go for it or not.
I just want to clarify, if I could, maybe, Mr. Gregori, but there's no legal obligation to reach out to all the pharmacies in Albany County or Rensselaer County or wherever people might live to tell them that an RFP might be coming
The
out.
RFP process, no, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, okay. Just want to be clear that there's no obligation like that. Mr. Gregori.
I'd like to understand, what will happen on December 1st if this resolution does not pass? Does Genoa cease operations? I think I was looking at I think it might have been a contract, and is there a month-to-month provision? What happens? And I've got some follow-up questions after that.
Well, essentially, what would happen is, the real-world aspect of it would be, they would stop doing business there. They would have to shut down. There are certain rules that they would have to follow through the Department of Health in terms of winding down their business. Obviously, there are people that are prescribed drugs, and it would probably, in my estimation, probably would go on for a month-to-month basis, maybe 30 days to 60 days, with essentially the county saying, okay, if it's not going to be renewed, you have to vacate by a certain date. But we just have to work within the parameters of, there are regulations that since this has flared up this week, you've been made aware of that you can't just shut down a pharmacy, tomorrow with existing people who are being prescribed medications. So
it is possible that as you go through this process, there could be, we'll get to the second part of this about litigation and not to compete, but there's the possibility that there would be, for some period, a void of services for an in-house pharmacy.
yes.
Okay, because if you decided to do that and you had to go through a process, I mean, that could take 6 months in and of itself.
That could happen in 2 years from now.
But you
So-
would know it was gonna end and you would start 8
Right.
months ahead of time.
That's right.
Doing an
Under the
RFP.
contract.
You wouldn't be doing it on
If we're gonna go
November
month to month for 2
15th
years,
for a
it's a
November
contract.
30th
Well, why is
expiration.
this, why,
Mr.
okay, why
Bergdorf.
did this just come on so late then?
Well, Mr. Bergdorf, just onto that point, we brought this in September.
Yeah, this didn't come on late.
Yeah,
anticipation of-
okay.
September.
In fact, we came in early.
What was the purpose of the non-compete? Generally, a non-compete compensates someone for an investment that they made in building the business. Was there substantial cost to the fit-out of the building?
Yes, it's
That-
my understanding, and I didn't negotiate the contract, but in going back to sort of recreate history, there was a significant investment by Genoa in the fit-up in terms of getting, number one, governmental approvals, number two, the actual construction and engineering of the site itself. And I apologize to this committee, I don't have a round number, but I know we're in the six figures in terms of an investment here. So there was that issue, that was part of the negotiation process of the contract. Also, oftentimes in these types of contracts, when the tenant is going to be doing a fit-up or making a significant investment, usually there's a makeup in rent. The rent is usually lowered. In this case, it was not. It was held firm at the sustaining rate, so their investment in the property was significant.
So they didn't roll any of the leasehold improvements into
No.
a rent depletion?
No.
No, okay.
Mr. Peter, I'm sorry, Mr. Bergdorf, are you okay?
I'm okay for now. Yes, I
Want to get as
mean,
much information out of these guys as we can.
yeah, that's, I understand.
Mr. Peter?
So this is actually, like, just a, Mr. Bergdorf brought up a point, and actually Ms. Whalen brought up a point, but let's even say we vote this down, right? Let's say, they don't even go after the no-compete clause, they just walk away. By the time, in order to accomplish the same thing, we would then have to do an RFP, right? A new RFP. We have to go out to bid, we have to do it, so we're talking probably an 8 or 9 month process, right? So here's my thing, I don't like the non-compete, I think there's a lot of things, but I also like this program. I like on-site. I don't think delivery accomplishes this. I don't think people walking to a pharmacy that's a couple blocks accomplishes this, for the points that Dr. G made. So if we vote this down, the people who are getting those services, and I just want to be realistic, are not gonna get them for at least 8 or 9 months in the same way that Dr. G is describing, no matter what we do. Even if Genoa walks away, doesn't sue us, doesn't do anything like that. And for me, that's unacceptable.
But it worked before.
It didn't. He literally just said it didn't. You're, like, you can't be, like, you can't question the law department and Dr. G and say he's wrong.
Was there a question in there?
So the question is, the question is this, right? Is it accurate to say if we vote this down, the program that Dr. G put together that he says is more successful than what previously happened will not be able to operate in the same way for at least 6 to 8 months based on getting a new RFP, at a minimum? Assuming
Perhaps 2 years.
Perhaps 2 years, based on Genoa potentially either suing us or not suing us. So best case scenario, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we vote this down, these people will not get the services that Dr. G provided in the same way for a minimum of 8 months and potentially a maximum of 2 years.
I would say that's a fair assessment.
Thank you. Mr. Ricard?
Thank you. I want to double down on something my colleague asked you. So before Genoa started, did you say that the compliance rate was 50%?
I said that the national industry standard for chronic illness was 50%, and the standard for chronic mental illness, the non-compliance rate was about 70 or 80%. We had no reason to believe that our shop was different, which is why we set out on a path to come up with an innovative, creative approach. And now we have numbers for these people, and they're where we would like them to be,
Which you said was 90%, right?
approaching 90%.
Okay. So the only other thing I'm going to ask you is, would you say that Genoa Pharmacy specializes in this field of behavior health, mental, challenge?
To my knowledge, that is their only business.
Okay, so they're a special firm in that.
Nationally, they work in the behavioral health space.
Expert in the field, would you say?
They proved that to me, yes, I would say.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
I want to make sure all the committee members have their questions addressed first. Ms. Whalen?
Okay, just another hypothetical. So let's say this gets put through, and in 2 years, it's up again for extension, otherwise it's going to be terminated. So how will the process work so that you're not?
Work exactly the same way.
So you'll be in a window of time where someone will have to wait 8 to 9 months for an RFP to go through?
No, we'll
and-
re-RFP the program, just like we just did as I described.
But then there'll be a gap in service?
No, we will prepare the RFP as Genoa is like we do any other contract for any other service in any other department. We'll prepare the RFP and release it and get responses in time to get them in-house, ready to start right off. And that could be anybody who bids on the contract, like any other contract in the county.
So,
Could I
Mr.
jump
McLaughlin?
in, could I jump in on that point? Because
Okay.
that's not accurate. This agreement, the non-compete clause indicates that upon termination, and Jordan has, CMHC will not enter into any agreement with a party who provides on-site pharmacy that is substantially the same for the 2-year period, right? Expiration or termination. So you will not be able to renew You won't, I know what you're saying, we start 8 months in advance, and when this one ends, we have a new one starting up. You won't be able to do that, unless Genoa happens to be the winner. Because according to this agreement, there's a 2-year dead window. There's 2 years that has to sit and lay fallow. So the question is, when do you want those 2 years to start? Do you say we're not gonna renew the contract now and start your 2 years now? Or stick with Genoa, and then, obviously, if Genoa's not the successful winner, you're gonna have to sit 2 years after that. Or, I might suggest, the agreement also says the terms should be, the agreement can be renewed upon mutual consent and subject to the consent of the Albany County Legislature. Perhaps it might be a situation where there could be a conversation between the county attorney's office about this covenant with Genoa, and then the committee could consider if in fact Genoa was willing to take this, this covenant out, then there could be a renewal.
My understanding is that that covenant only applied to if the contract was not renewed.
No, it says during the term and for 2 years after expiration or termination of this agreement.
It seems like an ad infinitum 2-year waiting
So
period.
that's the problem.
It seems
So,
like
but
it
my
should
understanding is
perpetuate
that,
forever.
excuse me, my understanding is that Genoa has somehow agreed to,
Way back.
agree to that 2-year period, not continuing in the
My under-
future, that it would just be for
That's correct.
this
That was
current
always the
2-year
intention,
period.
and I think.
Yes,
Council
my
and
understanding was that after speaking with Mr. Collins and Law last month after
Yep.
getting feedback from the legislators, that Genoa had agreed
That's
to
correct.
run concurrent the do not compete clause with this 2-year renewal.
Yeah, and that had been the intention.
Okay.
And so that will not come up again
There'll be a new contract upon renewal.
without this
We would like to,
non-compete.
the idea would be to renegotiate that part of the contract. The idea, again, going to what Mr. Bergdorf was saying, you know, over the course of the years, the value of their, I mean, they got their bang for their buck in their investment initially, and as the years go on, it's not worth as much, so their leverage to want that language in there goes down. So
Okay.
we would seek to renegotiate that.
Okay, committee members, are there any more questions for our experts who are here this evening? Okay, non-committee members, who has questions? Carolyn has her hand up and Mr. Fine, so Carolyn?
I just want to clarify that the last statement regarding when the clock would start moving for the non-compete clause, should this pass, it starts on December 30th or January 1?
Yep.
Is that when the clock starts, so that this 2-year period that we will be entering, that is the same 2-year period where the non-compete clause is in effect?
Is that accurate?
So that we're not in 2024 looking at another 2 years.
Right. No, it'd be December 1st.
Well, whatever the.
Yeah, no, you're correct.
So is that clear that
accurate?
and is that,
February
if Genoa has agreed to that, do we have it in writing?
I confirmed that last month.
Because I don't want to be back here again
Yeah, it has to be in writing.
in 2 years,
think I
saying
have it
we've
right.
got another 2 years.
Well, but that doesn't really make any much sense to me, because if the people call it the non-compete, it's a covenant that says after expiration or termination of this agreement, CMHC will not enter into any agreement with another party provides on-site pharmacy that are substantially the same. So the covenant only has application for after the end of the agreement, right? That's the only time the covenant has any teeth, is after the end of the agreement.
So when
if
is the
we're-
end of the agreement?
Well, so hold on, but if we're renewing the agreement for 2 years, to say that the covenant is gonna run, the 2-year covenant's gonna run simultaneously with the 2-year lease, that doesn't make any sense.
It's
That's
my
not-
understanding it would be part of the renewal agreement, that it would be written into the renewal agreement.
Right, so that's what.
So,
That's exactly, it should be part
do
of the
we
language of the
have-
new contract.
do we have a written, we probably do, excuse me, I'm just trying to make this clear. As we're giving them this 2-year extension, I'm not calling it a renewal, I'm calling it an extension. Is there a written agreement that General will sign that does away with that covenant? So it will not reappear again at the end of those 2
Right.
years?
Typically, we don't draft contracts until after the resolution is passed.
I don't have that in writing at this point.
She means, would you in the future? Would there be a?
Would in the future? Yes, there would
Yeah.
be. At the time when this was gonna
Yeah.
be signed, you know, if approved, yes, there would be.
There will be a separate renewal agreement of some sort.
Yes.
This
Correct.
does not authorize it and it goes off into the ether and,
That's
No,
yes,
there'll be
okay.
a new agreement negotiated, and presumably, we would like to get that taken out completely, or have it run concurrent.
Okay. If we approve this, right, I'm doing the if. And we put a covenant in there, our own covenant, sorry, I'm using really bad words.
Get rid of the covenant.
Right, to basically say, we are authorizing you to, let's hypothetically, right, like, let's say we move this, but we say, only the renewal can happen if that covenant is gone. Because that, I think, and I think I speak for most of my colleagues, that's going to be a major sticking point if it's not, or if for some reason we approve this under the assumption that Genoa is negotiating in good faith and then they don't. Because to Ms. McLaughlin's point, I don't want to be doing this in another 2 years. I would like to see a new RFP in approximately a year and 2 months, assuming we approve this. So that's the law department. And the question is, can we put something in that says, we only deem our approval assuming Genoa's running this concurrently, so that's it.
If that's what it's gonna take, then that's what we'll try to do.
I think we could put that in the resolution itself.
I would want to put that in the resolution itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll get 'em right now.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
No, that's helpful, thank you. It's a little past 7. Are there additional questions from committee members or non-committee members? Mr. Fine, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. Dr. Giordano, I had a couple questions based on what you mentioned. You mentioned that you didn't have compliance data from, you haven't received any compliance data from other pharmacies. I'm wondering did you ever approach or reach out to any of the other pharmacies and ask for that data?
No.
And also wondering, could you explain in more detail what the medical necessity would be that a prescriber would decide to use Genoa?
I've talked, as I said, to each of the prescribers on this point, and not all of the long-acting injectables did they feel this applied to, but they felt that there were some patients for whom they're following through with appointments, and they're showing up unexpectedly, and the risk of them not getting their medications was significant enough for them to want to prescribe it as conveniently and as accessible as possible. And it's the same reason why I said earlier that my understanding is that the great majority of these long-acting injectables were previously held at the previously most convenient location. Some of them now are at this most convenient location. And those were medical decisions that, I can't speak for each of the prescribers, but that's what they told me. And I reviewed every one of those cases. That was their response.
So some patients were using that previous pharmacy,
Yes.
Lincoln, and the prescriber made the decision that it should be moved to Genoa.
That's correct, and I would just like to say that, one of the principles for us from the beginning has been patient choice, and I think this is an important issue to address. Many of the folks who are on long-acting injectables, not only do they have chronic mental illness, some of them don't want to be in treatment, they don't want to take their medication, and they don't care where their pharmacy is. As a matter of fact, they'd rather not have a pharmacy. In those cases, a limited number of cases, the doctors made that proximal shift to Genoa. As explained to me, I didn't make those shifts, the doctors did.
Okay, that's a concern for me. Thank you.
So, just to add on to this, sorry to belabor the point, but when the issue came to light, and it came to light to our office first, in the exact same way and form as it's come to you, we did a full review, and I can say that because I'm the one who asked Dr. G to do it. So to say that the man has spent an exorbitant amount of time on this would be an understatement. And it went down to the granular level of every single case. And to say that prescribers get upset when their medical judgment is questioned would also be an understatement. So Dr. Giordano and his staff took it upon themselves to look at every single case. And to the individual, they said this was absolutely essential for the success of the individual in question. And as the questions by Legislator Kuhn determined, these individuals are unfortunately profoundly in need, okay? And they're some of the most difficult cases. So we have gone over this multiple times and confirmed that is the case.
We also did reach out to the patients, and then we realized very quickly that we were upsetting them unduly, so we didn't ask every one of the patients, but we did ask every one of the prescribers on each of the cases.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm sorry. Can I just, a follow-up on exactly what you just said. You talked to the prescribers about the fact that they had prescribed to Genoa?
I didn't, I asked this fine.
Okay.
Yes.
And so they offered up a sort of fulsome explanation of why they felt the in-house pharmacy was the best and necessary for those particular patients.
Yes, and what was even more convincing for me was not every one of their patients who was receiving long-acting injectables was managed that way. A subset were. And that subset, when asked, they felt that it was their medical decision that was.
So they were thoughtful and discriminating about it.
It was my impression that they were.
Okay. I just have one technical question. Prior to Genoa coming and being an on-site pharmacy, and patients were coming in to the health department, was not Lincoln supplying the injectables, delivering them to the health department?
Well,
Isn't that the case? Isn't that how they were servicing the clients prior to Genoa?
it's the mental health department, and yes.
The mental health department.
Yes, that is, you are accurate, yes. But as I said before, the same logic applied. The reason that those injectable medications were not all over the county, at all the pharmacies all over the county, was because Lincoln was very close to us. For that same logic, some patients were directed to Genoa because they were even closer. And for that subset of patients, the prescribers that I talked to felt that that was important. Not for all of them, but for a subset of them.
Okay, like 2 more questions, we are past 7. Ms. Whalen, because she's committee member, and then Sam, and then we're done.
Are the patients hindered by the fact that they're not opened on the weekends? Or do most of these injectables take place during the week?
These are all, well, again, I appreciate the injectables have become the point of contention. That's not the majority of our business, but the injections are done during business hours. So a patient can't pick up an injection on Sunday.
Do they ever
and-
show up to do on the weekends and it's closed, or that's not really a
Well,
problem?
I wouldn't know if they showed up because I'm not there, but, they all have appointments. They're all followed with case managers and nurses, and so.
Have any of your case managers reported issues
No.
related to access on weekends?
No.
Sam?
I just want to say, I'm concerned about that because Lincoln's compliance rate is over 90%. So maybe in some cases with some pharmacies, that decision would make sense, but it seems to me that making the decision to move the patient from Lincoln to Genoa would not be a, advantage to the patient.
So, aside from the fact that I find it dubious that we're questioning the prescribing practices of individuals who are treating the most mentally ill individuals in our community. If those individuals had issues with delivery services on the weekends, we have a very good provider right down the street who provided services for us for a long time and continues to do so, that is available. And they can go right back to it. As Dr. G said, they're still providing great service, and we have maintained for a very long time that they're a fantastic provider, and they provide more service than Genoa does currently. And guess who provides more service than that? CVS and all the others.
Yeah, it is important to know that 75% of all prescriptions filled this year, last year, and the year before Genoa were here has nothing to do with Genoa or Lincoln. And That's really one of my biggest concerns, is that, and again, this has become adversarial, and it's not my choice, no question about the quality that Lincoln has provided to the community. Our question is, the 75% of folks who are getting their prescriptions filled, God knows where, at Walmart, and that's the business that really is maybe leaving people at risk. But we believe that, for the people that it has affected, we're providing a quality service. And Legislative Fine, to your point, I don't doubt the numbers that you're citing. I've never seen them. They've never been offered to me. I don't know what subset of patients that reflects. I think more data is always a good thing, but I've never seen that data.
I just want to thank you so much for all of your research and work and hours on reviewing this particular situation, both with mental health department and law. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Peter?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion with the updating of the resolution that we talked about before, as we talked about with the law committee, but I'd make a motion.
What's the motion for?
The motion is to move this with the, actually, I'm sorry, what?
Without
It defaults to
recommendation, or?
Favorably, with the caveat that we discussed, that would be updated on the resolution.
Second.
Can we do that?
Second by Mr. Ricard.
I
So,
was told yes.
Okay.
so this is a motion to move this out favorably. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in this evening and for the
Thank you.
long discussion.
Thank you.
Oh, motion to
Second.
adjourn. Thank you. All in favor?
Yes.